for this Dhamma talk, which told me things that I had never heard before from any other source, only came about by chance when Venerable Ajaan talked to this woman who brought her problems to him. Before this, nobody had ever come to put this problem to him in circumstances where I was able to listen to such inspiring Dhamma. So I have called it Dhamma to inspire the heart, because it took hold of my heart. It was so indescribably elegant, and the truth that he was displaying went right home. From that time on, he never again brought up this subject to display to anyone else. The routine of chanting. The following routine is very close to the mode of practice as done by Venerable Ajaan Sao and Venerable Ajaan Mun, meaning that under normal circumstances there is no formal meeting for the purpose of paying respect and chanting. The only exception are those days when the Paṭipadā is chanted, and then the regular chants are recited before the recitation of the Paṭipadā every time. But on other days, even if there is a meeting for the Acharya to teach and train the Bhikkhus, when the time comes, the Bhikkhus assemble together and the Acharya goes straight into his explanation of Dhamma in the traditional way of those who practice. Before and after the teaching by the Acharyas, anyone who has an unresolved question in his heart may ask him as he feels like it. As soon as he has finished asking, the Acharya starts to explain and resolve the problem until the questioner understands clearly. Then, after the Acharya has given his talk, if there are no other questions or business to be discussed, they all pay their respects, the meeting ends, and then all return, each one to wherever he is staying. As far as I know, the reason why Venerable Ajaan did not institute any of the regular morning or evening chants when he called a meeting was that he intended the Bhikkhus and Samaneras to practice these chants and others on their own, as it suited them. He left it up to them to chant much, little, or extensively in the texts as they liked and for as long as they liked, according to whatever each one found to be helpful and convenient. Therefore the practice of chanting which they did depended entirely on what each individual wanted to do, and it was a form of pāvana which each one did in himself, because they did their recollection of the chants internally and silently, without making a loud noise as is the case when they all do it together. Some of them were very good at it and could go on chanting for several hours. They used to say that they became pleasantly engrossed in the various aspects of Dhamma which they recited, and it could take a long time before they got through the suttas which they chanted. Of the many chants that they knew, they would choose whichever they felt like doing, whether the short suttas or the long ones. In the days of Venerable Ajaan Sao and Venerable Ajaan Mun, they very much liked chanting, and each time they would go on for a long time. While chanting, the citta is not involved in anything else, and one becomes pleasantly absorbed in the aspects of Dhamma which one is chanting, until the citta becomes calm and peaceful. Venerable Ajaan Sao and Venerable Ajaan Mun used to do a lot of chanting, as they had always done since they first learned them, and they went on doing so until the end of their lives, when they became very weak and sick and could no longer keep it up. When Venerable Ajaan started chanting, one could hear a gentle murmuring noise going on continuously, without any breaks or hesitation, until he reached the end of his chanting after a long time, and then he would go on by sitting in samadhi pāvana until it was time for him to rest. So one can say doing the regular chanting was truly part of his routine. But when we look at this present age, which is an age of clever people, the Kammaṭṭhāna Bhikkhus, both those in the past and ourselves, have all derived from the world of people, so we may also be clever and have different ideas from those in the past, such as changing things and taking an easy way out. Who knows? Therefore, paying homage and chanting, which is a blessing of great benefit, and a most appropriate virtue for oneself and others, which the teacher or acharya has recommended, may suffer a change in those who think that it is a waste of time and out of date. They may be afraid that it is liable to reduce and diminish the weakness and laziness which is steadily piling up on top of their hearts, and that this will cut off the pleasure which is their nature and habit to derive all the time from such weakness and laziness. But for those who endeavor to strive and scramble up by doing the practice which has been taught to them, may they continue to uphold and exalt it, which is the appropriate response to the metta and compassion with which the acharyas have always tried to train and teach their followers. One can see how this is true at those times when one of the bhikkhus who had come under the umbrella of Venerable Ajaan's metta acted or behaved wrongly in some way, either outwardly or inwardly. He would tell him off soundly, and teach him whatever was needed in relation to what he had done. He would not leave him to pickle in that state until he started to stink. Various customs and ceremonies. I hope the reader will not mind me telling the whole truth in regard to this subject, because Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus of this lineage tend to be rather old-fashioned about the various ceremonies and customs of society. So when they are invited to any functions or ceremonies, they are usually seen to be rather awkward, and to appear to be embarrassed in ceremonial functions such as at funerals, and the chanting that is done when they are invited out to eat in people's homes. When a group of them are invited out, whether all Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus or mixed with other bhikkhus who are experienced and skilled in the ceremonies, the Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus are shown up by their awkward and ungraceful ways. Sometimes the host cannot help feeling ashamed in the face of all the guests who have come to honor him by taking time off to come to the ceremony. But the Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus are not used to the ways of society and all the formalities of these functions, for they have never had much occasion to get involved in society in their ceremonies, their time having been spent mostly in the forests and hills, and amongst villagers and hill people, who never have much in the ways of ceremonies and formalities. So when they are invited to various functions in the towns and cities, they generally behave in ways that are not right for the occasion in the way that the world conventionally expects. They do not know what hand they should use to hold the holy thread, or to sprinkle holy water, to hold the ceremonial fan, or to take the bangzakula cloth with, so as to conform to the custom. Some have even been known to hold the ceremonial fan the wrong way round, with the front side towards them and the back to the audience. Then their own followers and the rest of the people who have come cannot bear to see it, and must look elsewhere, for they feel ashamed. But the bhikkhu himself is relaxed and at ease, as if nothing at all is wrong, while the lay people cannot stand it and are burying their heads in shame. Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus are like this, and I, who am writing this, am particularly prone to this sort of thing, for I am invited out frequently, and I often let down my hosts and followers in this way. Generally, when I am in Bangkok, I am invited to funerals and other ceremonies, and I plead with them not to invite me, because I am almost bound to let them down with some faux pas or slip-ups. Even so, they won't listen and still invite me along, and in the end, that's exactly what happens. But they don't learn, for they still go on eagerly inviting me out all the time. Although my followers may be ready to put up with their acharya putting them to shame, he himself cannot put up with it, and so I don't like going to such functions. One can think of it as being like catching a wild monkey and letting it loose in society. How could it ever act gracefully and graciously? It is bound to end up causing embarrassment to all concerned, including itself. However much this happens, the Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus do not remember how to do these things, and they still keep on doing them all wrong, right up to the present day at every function they have to go to. When I think of my companions in Dhamma and all the acharyas who may be invited out to various functions in the towns and cities, I cannot help feeling embarrassed in anticipation of what they may do. For whatever happens, I can say for sure that the Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus of this lineage are bound to be like this when they are invited out, because I know very well how old-fashioned and backward they are, which is due to their never having learnt how to do all these things. So whenever they are invited out to any of these functions, they are always bound to be like fish out of water practically every time, and it makes no difference whether they have been in the order for a few or many years. Sometimes after the function has ended and the bhikkhu is leaving the place, one of his lay followers who feels upset by his behavior may go up to him and ask him very quietly, "Why did you do that? I felt really full of shame." But he does not even know what he has done wrong, so that the lay follower must quietly whisper to him and tell him what he should have done and how he must not do it in that way again, because it is wrong and the others will all laugh at him. They talk together, saying, "Today I also felt very embarrassed when I saw him doing whatever, for the bhikkhus here have never acted in that way." But the next time he goes out, he makes some other blunder. In fact, they are worse than children in this respect, for they don't know or remember the right way to do these things. This is the manner of the Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus of this lineage when they are invited out to perform in such functions and ceremonies. But when it comes to the Vinaya, which is the traditional manner of behavior and morality for bhikkhus, they seem to be quite capable of putting it into practice correctly and precisely, without making any mistakes like they do in ceremonial functions, which are the traditional ways of behavior that people in the world accept as being right. In fact, it is praiseworthy that they do not become attached to these worldly traditions, nor take any fixed attitude towards them in their hearts. Sometimes their companions ask them teasingly about some of their faux pas, like the case of the bhikkhu whom they saw holding the ceremonial fan back to front, with the decorated side facing himself, while he closed his eyes and gave the sila, the moral precepts, to the lay people, quite unconcerned and contented within himself. The other bhikkhus who saw this could not help seeing the funny side of it, but they had no way of telling him what was wrong because he was too far away from them. They just had to put up with their embarrassment and sit quietly until the end of the ceremony. When they left the place, they said to him teasingly, "Ho! Today you gave a wonderful performance, didn't you? Those who could bear to look at it almost died of shame." The bhikkhu didn't know what they were talking about and asked, "What wonderful performance?" So they told him, "You were holding the fan the wrong way round, and you closed your eyes and gave the sila completely unconcerned. If I didn't think it was a wonderful performance, I would be really stupid, so I must commend you for upholding the honor of Kammaṭṭhāna." The bhikkhu looked a bit puzzled, smiled gently, and said, "Did I really do that? I'm afraid I didn't think about which way round the fan was facing. All I knew was that I should take up the fan and hold it in front of me." This is the way of those who are Kammaṭṭhāna monks, for they are liable to make embarrassing mistakes wherever and whenever they go out to ceremonial functions. If it is claimed that they show up deficiencies in this manner, they can do nothing but accept it, because in fact it is true, and I who am writing this here also made such mistakes many times in the past. This is due to the main emphasis of training, which for Kammaṭṭhāna monks is quite different from that of others. However, in regard to the Vinaya discipline, the Kammaṭṭhāna monks are quite strict, and they are not afraid or disturbed when they go amongst other people in general, for they keep on training themselves and practicing the way in all situations. As for the various customs and ceremonial functions, they rarely go to any, and they are not the kind of things which they find interesting. Therefore, in such functions they always tend to be out of step and awkward. I, who am writing this, have also done such things which have been embarrassing and upsetting, but I still keep on doing such things right up to the present day. Having got to this point, I shall tell the story of how a Kammaṭṭhāna monk lost out once, to show how the ways of the forests and towns are different. In about the year 2476, or perhaps 77 Buddhist era, 1933 or 34 Common Era, there was a Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhu, and it seems that since he was ordained he had never gone into the towns and cities. He liked staying in the forest all the time, and had never studied the books and taken examinations like most other bhikkhus do. He had only learnt the 5 Kammaṭṭhānas and the 32 parts of the body from his teacher, after which he did the practice in the forest in company with his teacher and some companions, by using these methods to fix his attention firmly in samadhi bhavana. He was already 40 years old, and afraid that his body and mind, his sankhara, would not remain in a condition to support his practice for much longer, and that he may die before he had attained. One day a friend who was also practicing the way came and talked to him, saying how he had heard that there were many Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus in Korat, the district of Nakoa and Rajasima, in fact more than usual, and there were many places that were suitable for doing the practice in the forests and hills south and west of Korat, such as Kaobrig and Kaoyai. These places were very quiet and secluded, and very well suited to the development of samadhi bhavana. As soon as he heard this from his friend, he wanted to go there, and agreed to go along with him, considering that he was a guide who would lead him there. When they got to Korat, they went to stay in Wat Salawan, which was a new Wat, having recently been built up, and the abbot was Venerable Ajaan Singh Kandayakamo. In the morning, this bhikkhu and his friend went out on the Paṭipadā round in the town of Korat with the other bhikkhus. It happened that day that one of the lay followers giving food put a wrapped-up package of something in his bowl which he had never come across before, because he was a countryman from the northeast of Thailand, in Isan, and there was little likelihood of his having come across anything like this. Soon after this package was put in his bowl, he began to have grave doubts about it, because whenever he took off the lid of his bowl to receive food, he was assailed by a strange and powerful smell. He was not bold enough to actually say anything about it to anyone, but it made him suspicious that the lay people who gave the food may have played a trick on him. He thought, "Can they really do this to me? I am a bhikkhu who is free of malice and any desire to harm others, whether people or animals, and I have dedicated myself to this practice of striving for the path, fruition, and nibbana. It is not right for them to do such despicable things to bhikkhus like me. Maybe some bhikkhus did some bad things, making themselves objects of loathing to the lay people, which made them do this." He went on brooding over it all the rest of the time he was on Paṭipadā. Meanwhile, the offensive smell continued to assail his nose every time he took off the lid from his bowl to receive gifts of food. He tried not to lose his composure so as to avoid showing anything outwardly to the people, because he was a newcomer, and when he came across anything like this he should put up with it. But as soon as he left the residential area, he couldn't stand it any longer, so he opened his bowl and took out the offending package to have a look at what it was that had been troubling him all the time. When he opened the package of durian fruit which they had wrapped up and given to him with saddha, he couldn't help exclaiming, "For heaven's sake! I thought it was shit which was giving out such a bad smell, that they had wrapped up to teach the bhikkhus a lesson, and there I was, angry, disheartened, and sorry all the way along, and all the time it was just this rotten jackfruit, 3 years and 4 months old, influencing me until my heart turned away from the ways of a bhikkhu and became such that I hardly had any sati for quite some time." At the same time, he threw the package of rotten jackfruit, which was in fact durian, into the ditch at the side of the road, and then walked on happily and unconcerned and quite free of his previous doubts. He just made a mental note of how the fruit here seemed to be different from what he was used to, thinking, "This rotten jackfruit is not like those I have seen at home, for however rotten the ones at home were, they never gave out such a strong and unbearable smell like the ones here. Whoever put it in my bowl, even though they had no bad intention towards the bhikkhus, they must have been very unperceptive and inattentive to be able to put such a useless rotten jackfruit in the bowl of a bhikkhu, making him put up with the smell while walking along." He must have been thinking a lot about this incident, because he told the bhikkhu who came with him all about it that afternoon, starting off by saying, "Why is it that this province and the one we have just come from have such different climates even though they are both part of Isan, so that even the same kinds of fruit have quite a different smell?" "What fruits are different, and in what way?" the other bhikkhu asked him. "The jackfruit at home, even when they have become completely rotten and inedible, don't give off a very bad smell, whereas although I haven't seen the ripe ones, those that they put in our bowls this morning, you must have got some as well, they had such a bad smell. I couldn't stand it all the way back to the wat, and I threw it away in the ditch. Didn't they give you some of this jackfruit also? You must have got some, as you were in front of me." "What they put in our bowls this morning, eh? That wasn't jackfruit. Good grief, it seems that you have never seen a durian before, and that was what you threw into the ditch, was it?" "Yes, because I couldn't stand it any longer. Why should I go on carrying it about?" The other bhikkhu said, "For heaven's sake, don't you know what a durian is? What they put in your bowl this morning was durian, the most expensive fruit in Thailand. People who are poor and unfortunate can cry their eyes out for the taste of it, but you just throw it away. And the people who gave it went out of their way to get it and put it in your bowl with true sattva. Why did you throw it away? You should have at least asked someone else about it before throwing away something valuable like that. Haven't you ever seen durian before?" "No. This is the first time I've come across it, this morning, and I almost fainted with the smell. People may say it's wonderful and special as much as they like, but I have a nose, and it's not going to let anyone fool me about it. This morning I knew it with my own nose until I couldn't stand it any longer and threw it away. So how can you praise it as being ripe and wonderful? You ought to know that the nose of a person is not the same as that of a dog. For the nose of a dog would tell it one thing, but people are more clever than dogs, and that they should take up a dog's understanding in place of the understanding of a person I cannot agree with. This fruit is just like shit, and regardless of how expensive it may be, I wouldn't accept it even if it was given freely to me. Otherwise, why should I have thrown it away? Only because I couldn't stand it, and so I took this way out." The other bhikkhu smiled in an amused way and said, You can't have been born complete. You see something good and valuable and don't know that it is good. In fact, you think it is false. I can't think of any other way to explain it to you." The rotten jackfruit bhikkhu just smiled, but the way he spoke was quite adamant, and he took no notice of what the other bhikkhu said in praise of the durian which he was given. From what has been said up to now, it is likely that the reader will think that the true Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhu is ready to listen to what others have to say at any time, but in some cases they will not listen to anyone, and then they are likely to argue forcefully while firmly maintaining their standpoint, such as the above rotten jackfruit bhikkhu. So it seems that the forest people and bhikkhus are very different from the people and bhikkhus who live in the villages and towns, to the extent that in coming across a durian, he could think that it was a rotten jackfruit and then throw it away in the ditch. If he had been more observant and thoughtful, appropriate to the blame he levelled at others, saying that they were unobservant and inattentive, he might have tried carrying it in his bowl with the lid closed until he got back to the wat and could ask someone else about it before throwing it away. For the way he did it was the way of one who has no wisdom. But really, one cannot help feeling some sympathy for this bhikkhu who had never seen durian fruit, due to his having lived in the forest when communications were so very different from what they are now, and he had never had any opportunity to see unusual things, like we have nowadays. This is how the forest bhikkhus are bound to be when they are invited out into the towns and cities. They still have the characteristics of the forest bhikkhu who came across a rotten jackfruit. But the type of Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhu who is so clever and up-to-date that he sets one's teeth on edge may also be mixed up in them in the same way as are good and evil. Although whether it is too old-fashioned or too clever and modern, it is most likely to be inappropriate and unseemly in both cases because it does not accord with the principles of the middle way of Dhamma, which is truly sufficient and appropriate. But to be old-fashioned like the above bhikkhu makes one feel sorry for him.